Imagine being a brand new mother, holding your baby in the freezing Ohio winter, with no money, no food, and no one to turn to. Now imagine the very people you thought would protect you, your own family, are the ones who abandoned you. This is the true story of Emily, a young woman who lost everything in one night but found the strength to rise again. It's a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and the incredible power of a mother's love. And once you hear it, you'll never forget it. But before I tell you exactly how Emily's world collapsed, and how her own family left her and her newborn baby to suffer in the cold, you need to hear this. The ending of her story is nothing like the beginning. What starts with betrayal and heartbreak will end with strength, justice, and a kind of victory no one in her family ever saw coming. Stay with me, because once you know what really happened, you'll realize this is more than just one woman's story. It's a lesson in how love and courage can turn even the darkest night into a new beginning. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button, turn on notification, and comment where you're watching from. When I look back on that winter in Ohio, I can still feel the cold in my bones. Not just the kind of cold that makes your fingers numb or your cheeks sting, but the kind of cold that sinks deep inside you and makes you feel completely alone in the world. It was December. The snow piled up along the sidewalks of Cleveland, and the wind cut sharp like knives. I was standing outside with nothing but a baby in my arms and a couple of trash bags filled with what was left of my life. My name is Emily Parker. 3 weeks earlier, I had been Emily Parker, wife of Daniel Parker, proud new mother of a baby girl named Lily. I thought I had a family, a home, a future. But on that day, I was just Emily, 32 years old, holding my 3-week-old daughter in the freezing cold, with nowhere to go. Daniel had planned it all. That's what still shocks me when I think about it. This wasn't some accident or fight gone wrong. He had been setting this up for months, maybe even longer. The lease was only in his name, not mine. Car his. The bank account drained without me even noticing. He canceled my credit cards, cut me off from everything, and then filed for divorce. It was like he wanted to erase me completely and make sure I had nothing. That morning, the sheriff showed up at the door with an eviction notice. Daniel wasn't even there. He had already driven off in his silver BMW, probably heading to wherever his new life waited for him. The sheriff looked at me standing there in the doorway with my tiny baby wrapped in blankets and said gently, "Ma'am, you need to vacate the premises." I remember clutching Lily tighter, whispering into her tiny ear, "It's okay, sweetheart, Mommy's here." But the truth was, I wasn't sure I could take care of her anymore. My chest ached with fear as I packed up what I could in garbage bags and stepped out into the snow. The door shut behind me with a final click, like the sound of my life ending. The sheriff wasn't unkind. He even hesitated, his eyes soft as he looked at Lily's red little face. "You got any family around here?" he asked. And I did. That was the first thought that came to my mind. I had parents. I had a brother and a sister. Surely, if ever there was a time to lean on family, this was it. I was standing in 6 inches of snow, my newborn crying in my arms, and I thought, they'll help me. They'll take us in. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, scrolling to my mom's number. My mom had always been the one I called when life got hard. She was the one who tucked me in at night when I was little, who taught me how to bake cookies, who held my hand when I was nervous. Surely she'd help me now. The phone rang and she picked up. "Hello, Mom," I said, my voice breaking. "I need help. Daniel left me. He had me evicted. I'm outside in the snow with Lily. We have nowhere to go." There was a pause on the line. I could hear the sound of the TV in the background, Dad watching the evening news like always. Finally, Mom sighed. "Oh, honey," she said slowly, carefully. This is a lot. You know your dad is still recovering from his surgery. We just don't have the space for you here." My throat tightened. "Mom, I'm not asking to move in forever. Just for tonight. It's 12 degrees outside. Lily is only 3 weeks old. Please." Her voice hardened. "Emily, you need to understand our position. We're on a fixed income. We can't afford to support you and the baby." And honestly, I heard her whisper something to Dad, then came back on the line. "Well, we warned you about Daniel. We told you he was controlling. You didn't listen. Tears burned my eyes. Are you really lecturing me right now? While your granddaughter is out here in the snow? Don't take that tone with me, young lady, Mom snapped. You made your choices. You're 32 years old. Actions have consequences. Maybe this is exactly the wake-up call you needed. And then the line went dead. I stared at the phone in disbelief as snowflakes gathered on the screen. My baby cried harder, her little face scrunched and red. I pressed her closer to me, my tears falling on her blanket. I tried my sister next. Megan. She had been my maid of honor at my wedding. We used to talk every day, share secrets, laugh at stupid inside jokes. If anyone would understand, it would be her. Megan, thank God you answered, I said quickly when she picked up. I need your help. Daniel left me and Lily. We're homeless. Can we stay with you tonight? There was silence, then Megan said, Wait, what? Emily, slow down. I explained everything. How Daniel had drained the accounts, the eviction, the divorce papers. She listened quietly, and for a moment I felt a flicker of hope. That's awful, she said at last. I'm so sorry. But I just don't think we can help right now. You know how stressed Kevin is with work, and the kids have their routines. We barely have enough space as it is. Megan, I'm not asking to move in forever. Just one night. Please, Lily needs warmth, she needs food. I know, she said. But you have to understand. Kevin's really particular about who's in the house. And honestly, Emily, this is kind of your fault, isn't it? We all knew Daniel was bad news. He isolated you from us, controlled everything. We tried to tell you, but you defended him every time. You chose him over us. Her words hit me like a punch. Megan, please. She's 3 weeks old. It's freezing. Maybe this is what you need, she said quietly. Maybe hitting rock bottom will finally teach you to be independent. You've been making bad choices for years. Someone has to say it. The line went dead again. I stood there, snow soaking through my shoes, my baby's cries piercing the empty street. I dialed my brother, Josh. He didn't answer at first, then finally picked up sounding annoyed. Emily, what the hell? I'm at dinner with clients. This better be important. It is, I begged. Daniel left me. I'm homeless with Lily. Please, we need somewhere to go. Jesus, Emily, he muttered. You sure know how to pick them. Look, I'm sorry, but I can't help right now. Melissa's pregnant, she's sick all the time, and having a newborn in the house would just make everything worse. Besides, we just bought this new place and money is tight. You need to figure this out on your own. One night, Josh. Please. She's your niece. He sighed. Emily, you married Daniel against everyone's advice. You ignored us when we told you he was manipulative. You cut us off for him. Now you expect us to fix it. Call social services or something. This isn't our problem. When he hung up, I stared at my phone in shock. 3 calls. 3 rejections. 3 family members who would rather lecture me than help save their niece. By then, my tears had frozen on my face. I loaded Lily into the old Honda Daniel had left behind, probably because it barely ran, and sat there shivering in the driver's seat. Lily cried until she was exhausted, her tiny breaths shallow and weak. I looked at her pale little face and panic gripped me. I tried more numbers. My aunt, my cousin, even my uncle who had once borrowed money from me. Each conversation went the same way. First sympathy, then excuses, then lectures. Every single one of them turned me away. Some even said maybe God was trying to teach me a lesson. It was almost midnight by the time I gave up on family. I drove to a women's shelter, but they were full. Another one wouldn't take infants. Third had a waiting list. So I kept driving around Cleveland, running the heater to keep Lily warm, burning through what little gas I had left. At a 24-hour diner, I changed her diaper in the bathroom, tried to feed her, and prayed she wouldn't get sick. She was so small, so fragile. And the more I looked at her, the more I thought I might have to give her up, at least temporarily, to make sure she survived. By dawn, I was parked outside the hospital where she'd been born 3 weeks earlier, wondering if I should walk inside and ask someone to take her from me. My heart broke at the thought, but I didn't know what else to do. That's when I remembered something Daniel had once said in passing about my grandmother's will. Something about my mom handling things, something about money. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. But now, with Lily sleeping beside me in the car seat, I pulled out my phone and searched my contacts. There it was. Mr. Harold Bennett. My grandmother's old lawyer. He had been around forever, probably retired by now. But I had nothing left to lose. My hands shook as I pressed his number. The phone rang 6 times before a raspy old voice answered. Bennett speaking. Mr. Bennett, this is Emily Parker. Well, Emily Collins before I married. Rose Collins was my grandmother. There was a pause. Then his voice warmed. Emily, my dear. Rose's granddaughter. My goodness, how are you? I swallowed hard. Not good, sir. I'm calling about her estate. I need to know exactly what she left behind. There was another pause. Then Mr. Bennett said slowly, well now, that's an interesting question. Your grandmother's will was very specific. And to tell you the truth, I've been wondering for years why no one contacted me about the remaining provisions. My heart skipped a beat. Remaining provisions. Yes, he said. Your parents were to manage some assets until you turned 30. But there were additional investments, properties, and accounts that were to be transferred directly to you on your 30th birthday. That was 2 years ago. The world seemed to tilt around me. What do you mean? I mean, Emily, he said gently. Your grandmother left you a fortune. As of the last statement, you have about $2.7 million waiting for you. Your parents have been receiving the account updates for over a decade. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My parents knew. They knew for years. And while I froze in the snow with their granddaughter, they said nothing. Mr. Bennett, I whispered, what do I need to do to claim it? I don't think I'll ever forget that moment. Sitting in that beat-up Honda in the hospital parking lot, my baby asleep in the back seat, and Mr. Bennett's voice on the other end of the line telling me that I had been sitting on a fortune for the past 2 years. $2.7 million. Enough money to buy a home, raise Lily safely, live without fear. And all that time my parents knew. I pressed my hand against my forehead, shaking as the truth sank in. All those phone calls last night. My mother's cold voice telling me actions have consequences, my sister saying I had brought this on myself, my brother brushing me off. They had all lied to me by omission. They had let me freeze in the snow with their granddaughter while they hid the fact that I had more money than all of them combined. Mr. Bennett, I said again, trying to keep my voice steady. How do I get access to it? What do I need to do? Well, Emily, he said, his voice careful, you'll need to come to my office. I'll pull the paperwork and show you everything. But I must warn you. It looks like your parents and some other family members have been using parts of your inheritance as collateral. Loans, investments, even some legal fees tied to your husband's name. If what I'm seeing is correct, they've been dipping into your accounts for years. My breath caught. They stole from me. Technically, they weren't supposed to touch a dime, he said. The trust was yours once you turned 30. The only reason they had access at all was because your grandmother appointed them to oversee it until then. After you turned 30, all they had to do was sign it over to you. But they didn't. They kept it hidden. I imagine they assumed you'd never ask questions. A laugh slipped out of me, bitter and broken. They watched me struggle. They knew Daniel was controlling me, isolating me. They let me suffer. And now this. Mr. Bennett sighed. I can't speak to their intentions, Emily. But I can tell you this. The money is rightfully yours. We can begin transferring things as soon as you come in. Can you make it to my office this week? I looked at the tiny baby in the back seat, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. I thought about the gas gauge on empty, the bag of diapers nearly gone, the fact that I had no safe place to take her. Yes, I whispered. I'll come today. When I hung up, I sat there for a long moment staring at Lily. She opened her little mouth in a yawn, her face pink in the morning light. She had no idea what we'd just discovered, no idea that her whole life had just changed. I drove across town to Mr. Bennett's office, my heart pounding the entire way. The building was old and brick, tucked between a laundromat and a diner. I carried Lily inside, the smell of coffee and paper filling the air. The receptionist looked up with surprise when I said my name, then hurried to lead me back. Mr. Bennett was in his 70s, with a full head of white hair and glasses perched low on his nose. When he saw me, he smiled warmly, like he had been waiting for this day for a long time. "My goodness," he said, standing to shake my hand. "You look so much like your grandmother. And this must be little Lily. What a blessing." I tried to smile, but my eyes were already filling with tears. "She's all I've got," I said softly. He nodded, his face serious. "Then we're going to make sure she never suffers again." For the next hour, he laid everything out in front of me. Account statements, property deeds, investment portfolios. I barely understood half of it, but what I did understand was enough to make me sick. My parents had been using my inheritance as if it were their own. They had taken out loans against it to help my brother buy his house. They had withdrawn funds to pay for my sister's wedding. They had even used it to cover part of Daniel's divorce lawyer fees. "Unbelievable," I whispered, my hands shaking as I flipped through the papers. They watched me struggle. They told me to learn responsibility. And all this time they were stealing from me. Mr. Bennett leaned forward, his eyes kind. "Your grandmother left this to you because she believed in you, Emily. She wanted to make sure you were always safe, always cared for. She adored you. I think she would be heartbroken to see what's happened." I swallowed hard. She trusted them to protect me. And they betrayed her too. He nodded. "But now it's time to take it back. This money is yours. We'll freeze their access immediately and begin transferring control to you. It might take a little time, but soon you'll have full authority. Until then, I can release emergency funds for you and Lily. Enough to get you into a hotel, buy food, clothes, whatever you need." Relief crashed over me so strong I nearly collapsed. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe. "Thank you," I whispered, clutching Lily to my chest. "Thank you so much." By that evening, I was checked into a warm hotel room overlooking downtown Cleveland. Lily lay bundled in fresh blankets, a bottle in her mouth, while I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the city lights. For the first time, I let myself cry without holding back. But these weren't just tears of pain anymore. They were tears of rage, of betrayal, of realization. My own blood had left me for dead, all while living off money that was meant to protect me. And now they had no idea that I knew the truth. I started recording everything. I saved copies of the account statements. I replayed the voicemails and phone calls from my family, each one of them telling me no while I begged for help. Piece by piece, I built a record of their cruelty, their lies, their selfishness. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about justice. For days, I stayed in that hotel, meeting with Mr. Bennett, signing papers, slowly regaining control of my life. Each time I fed Lily or changed her, I whispered promises to her. "You'll never feel cold again. You'll never be hungry. You'll never know what it feels like to be abandoned." And with each promise, I felt myself growing stronger. But the anger never left. At night, when Lily finally slept, I would lie awake imagining the faces of my parents, my sister, my brother. I thought about how easily they had turned me away, how quickly they had chosen comfort over compassion. And then I thought about what I would say when I finally confronted them, because one day soon I would. The days that followed felt like living in two worlds at once. On one hand, I was finally safe. Lily slept peacefully in a crib the hotel provided. The heater kept us warm, and every morning I could make her bottles without worrying where the next one would come from. For the first time since Daniel walked out, I could breathe without my chest tightening in panic. But on the other hand, every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of my family as they turned me away. My mother, her voice cold and sharp, telling me this was my consequence. My sister, whispering that maybe this was what I needed. My brother, brushing me off like I was nothing but an inconvenience. And all the while, they were living off money that wasn't even theirs. I would sit in that hotel room at night, the city lights twinkling outside the window, and my anger would burn so hot it kept me awake. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was determined. I had Lily to protect now, and if I was going to raise her right, I needed to stand up not just for us but for every wrong my family had done. One night, I called Mr. Bennet again. "I need to know everything," I said. "Every loan, every account, every way they've used what was mine. I want it all laid out." He hesitated. "Emily, are you sure? Some of what we'll uncover may be painful." I looked down at Lily, her tiny fists curled as she dreamed. "It can't hurt worse than what I've already lived through." So he got to work. 2 days later, I sat across from him in his office as he spread out a thick folder on the table. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Here," he said, pointing to the first set of documents. "This is your brother's mortgage. He used nearly $150,000 from your inheritance as collateral when the bank wouldn't approve him. Without that, he wouldn't have that big new house he bragged about." Clenched my jaw. "And here," Mr. Bennet continued, sliding another paper toward me, "your sister's wedding expenses. Nearly $75,000. Designer dress, venue, catering. All paid through your accounts." I shook my head in disbelief. Megan had stood in front of me in her glittering gown, smiling from ear to ear, and I had told her how beautiful she looked. I never knew it was my money making her sparkle. "And then here," he said softly, "this is the hardest one. Your husband, Daniel. His attorney's fees in filing the divorce, paid in part from your inheritance. They gave him the resources to take everything from you, using your own money." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. "They knew," I whispered. "They all knew. And they let me walk into this blind." Mr. Bennet placed his hand gently on mine. "Emily, they've built their comfort on your suffering. But you don't have to let it continue." That night, I stared at the ceiling in my hotel room, replaying everything in my head. My family's words, their excuses, the smug look Daniel always wore when he thought he had control over me. And then I looked at Lily's face, soft and innocent, and I made a decision. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to rise from it. The next morning I called Mr. Bennet again. "I need more than paperwork," I told him. "I need proof. Records, voices, anything that shows exactly what they did and what they said. I want to build something they can't deny, something they can't twist into lies." He suggested hiring a private investigator, someone discreet but thorough. First, the idea scared me. It felt so far from the woman I used to be, the woman who had spent years shrinking under Daniel's shadow, apologizing for things I hadn't done wrong. But that woman was gone. When I met the investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Carla who had worked in Cleveland for years, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope mixed with courage. Carla shook my hand firmly. "I've seen a lot of ugly family situations," she said. "But if what your lawyer told me is true, this is one of the worst. Don't worry, Emily. We'll dig. And when I find something, you'll have the truth in your hands." And she did. Over the next few weeks, she uncovered more than I ever imagined. My parents had been siphoning money for over a decade, covering up the withdrawals with fake paperwork. They had lied to banks, even to extended family, all to keep their image polished while leaning on me as their hidden piggy bank. But the most gut-wrenching evidence was in the recordings Carla found. Snippets of conversations, old voicemails, messages between family members. In one, my mother told my sister, "Don't worry, Emily will never know. She's too distracted with Daniel. We'll keep this between us." In another, my brother laughed. "She's so naive. She'll never figure it out. Besides, it's not like she deserves it after choosing that loser husband." Each word was like a knife in my chest, but instead of cutting me down, it sharpened me. Every cruel sentence made me stronger. I began to change. Slowly at first, but steadily. I started dressing differently, Not just in the worn-out clothes Daniel had picked for me, but in things I chose myself. Strong colors, warm coats, shoes that made me feel steady on my feet. I opened a new bank account in my name only. I began sketching out a plan, late at night when Lily slept, scribbling in a notebook about the life I wanted to build. I wrote down words that I had forgotten belonged to me. Independence, freedom, dignity. And then I added one more word, justice. Because it wasn't enough to move on. I couldn't just let my family walk away after everything they had done. They had stolen from me, betrayed me, abandoned me and Lily when we needed them most. And the world needed to know. I didn't want revenge for the sake of revenge. I wanted something bigger. I wanted to take all that pain, all that betrayal, and turn it into something that could help others who had been left behind, just like me. That's when the idea first came to me. An organization, a foundation, something in Lily's name. A way to make sure no other mother and child would ever be left out in the cold the way we were. It was just a seed of an idea back then. A fragile dream written in shaky handwriting in a cheap notebook. But it gave me direction. Gave me purpose. And it gave me strength for what I knew I had to do next. Because sooner or later, I was going to face my family again. And when I did, I wasn't going to be the desperate, shivering woman standing outside in the snow, begging for help. I was going to be someone they couldn't ignore. There comes a moment in every story where the victim has to make a choice. Stay broken or rise up. For me, that moment came in the quiet hours of a snowy January morning in Cleveland. Lily was asleep in her crib, the heater humming softly, the city outside blanketed in white. I sat at the little desk in the hotel room with my notebook open, staring at the word I had written over and over again the night before. Justice. Justice wasn't about punishing them. Not really. It was about reclaiming what they had stolen. Not just the money but my dignity, my future, my sense of self. They had tried to break me, but instead they had given me a reason to fight. I started with the practical things. Mr. Bennett continued to transfer control of the accounts into my name. The first time I saw my new balance I cried. Not because of the number but because of what it meant. For the first time in my adult life I was free. No one could control me. No one could tell me where to live, what to eat, or who to depend on. With Carla's reports in hand, I had proof of everything. Every withdrawal, every forged signature, every conversation where they mocked me. I tucked the papers into a folder and kept it safe, like a weapon I wasn't ready to use yet but knew I would one day. But I also thought about something bigger. I remembered the freezing night when I had called every family member I could think of, begging for help. I remembered the shelters turning me away because Lily was too young. I remembered standing in that hospital parking lot wondering if I should give up my baby just so she could survive. And I thought, what about the mothers who don't get a call from a lawyer? What about the women who don't have a hidden inheritance waiting to save them? What happens to them? That's when the Emma Rose Foundation was born. Named after Lily's middle name, Rose. After the grandmother who had loved me more than anyone else. A foundation for mothers and children abandoned in crisis. A place to turn when everyone else turns them away. I didn't know how to run a foundation. I didn't know the first thing about nonprofits or fundraising or community programs. But I knew what it felt like to be out there in the snow, clutching a newborn with nowhere to go. And I knew no one should ever feel that way again. So I started small. I called the shelter that had turned me away and asked to speak with the director. I told her my story, not all of it, but enough. I asked what they needed most. Blankets, diapers, formula, car seats. The next morning, I showed up with a carload of supplies. The staff looked at me with surprise, but when they saw Lily in her car seat, they understood. I wasn't some rich stranger throwing money around. I was one of them. Word spread quickly. Other shelters called. Churches reached out. Soon I was making deliveries every week, supplies, food, emergency funds. I saw the faces of women with babies in their arms, just like me, eyes hollow with exhaustion, and I told them, "You are not alone. Someone cares." And each time I said it I felt stronger. Because I wasn't just talking to them. I was talking to the broken version of myself too, the one who had believed she had no one. As the weeks turned into months, the foundation grew. Hired staff. We found office space. Volunteers signed up. Donations poured in once people heard the mission. Every night I came back to Lily, kissed her tiny forehead and whispered, "Look what you started. Look what your name is building." But even as the foundation blossomed, the other part of my life, the darker part, was never far from my mind. The folder of evidence sat in my desk drawer, heavy as a stone. I knew one day I would use it. I just didn't know when. That moment came sooner than I expected. One evening, as I was leaving the foundation office, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. It was my mother. For a long moment I just stared at the screen. My first instinct was to let it ring, to give her the same silence she had given me. But something inside me, maybe curiosity, maybe the need to finally hear her voice without fear, made me swipe to answer. "Emily," she said, her voice trembling. "It's your mother." "I know who it is," I said quietly. There was a pause. Then she sighed. "We've been hearing things. About you. About some organization you started. And about the money. Your father is furious. He says Mr. Bennett had no right to release those funds to you. We want to talk." I almost laughed. "Now you want to talk? After the night you left me and your granddaughter to freeze?" Her voice hardened. "Don't twist this around. You know we only did what we thought was best. We didn't want to enable you. But this is different. You've taken money that was supposed to be for the family. For all of us. The family." Snap. "That money was mine. Grandma left it for me. And you knew it. You used it for yourselves, for Josh, for Megan, even for Daniel. You watched me struggle, you let me beg for help, and you said no. Now you want to pretend it was for the family." She was silent for a moment, then said softly, "Emily, you don't understand. Families share. Families take care of each other." My hands shook with anger. Families protect their own. Families don't let a new mother and her baby freeze to death. You don't get to call this family anymore. I hung up before she could answer. That night, I sat by Lily's crib and cried. Not because I was weak, but because I finally saw them for what they were. Not just selfish. Not just cruel. But strangers. People who had chosen themselves over me, over my child, over love. And I knew then what I had to do. I wasn't going to hide the truth. I wasn't going to bury their betrayal in silence. I was going to confront them face to face with everything I had. The next week I arranged it. A family dinner, neutral ground. A rented hall where no one could claim home turf. I invited them all. My parents, my brother, my sister, even Daniel. They didn't know what was coming. They thought it was a meeting to make peace. But I wasn't going there to make peace. I was going there to tell the truth. The night of the dinner, the air felt heavy with snow, though the sky hadn't opened yet. I drove slowly through the quiet streets of Cleveland, the headlights cutting through the early dusk. Lily was with a trusted sitter, safe and warm, so I could focus on what I had to do. My hands gripped the steering wheel, tight enough that my knuckles ached. I kept reminding myself, this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about screaming or punishing. It was about truth. And once the truth was spoken, I could finally breathe. The hall I had rented wasn't fancy, just a community space with a long table and folding chairs, but I had chosen it because it was neutral ground. No one could hide behind my house, my rules. When I walked in, they were already there, all of them. My parents at one end, stiff and cold. Josh leaning back in his chair, looking smug. Megan, arms folded, eyes rolling. Daniel, sitting quietly at the far side, not meeting my gaze. For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy and awkward. Then my father cleared his throat. "So," he said, his voice clipped. "We're here. What is this about, Emily? Are you finally ready to come to your senses and hand back what doesn't belong to you?" I sat down at the opposite end of the table, laid my folder in front of me, and looked at each of them in turn. My voice was calm, steady. "This is about the truth. For years you've told yourselves a story. That I was weak. That I was unworthy. That I didn't deserve Grandma's inheritance. That my pain didn't matter. But tonight we're going to set the record straight. My mother's lips tightened. Emily, don't be dramatic. I opened the folder and spread out the papers across the table. Bank statements. Copies of forged signatures. Carla's transcriptions of their words. This, I said, tapping the papers, is what you did. Every dollar you took. Every lie you told. Every decision you made behind my back. You left me to beg for food, for diapers, while you were dipping into what was meant to secure my future. And when I asked for help, you slammed the door in my face. Josh snorted. You make it sound like we stole from you. We used the money for things the family needed. No, I shot back, my voice sharp enough to cut the air. You used it for yourself. For your cars, your trips, your comforts. And you knew exactly what you were doing, Josh, because I have the recordings to prove it. He paled slightly, though he tried to hide it behind a smirk. Megan leaned forward, sneering. Oh, please. You think waving a few papers around makes you the hero? You were always the problem, Emily. You always wanted more than your share, more attention, more sympathy. You brought this on yourself. I took a deep breath. No, Megan. I wanted what was mine. What Grandma left for me. And I wanted love. I wanted family. But when I needed you most, you turned your backs. You called me weak. You mocked me while I cried on the phone with a newborn in my arms. That wasn't me being the problem. That was you showing me who you really are. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't the tears of remorse. They were the tears of someone cornered. Emily, you have no idea what kind of pressure we were under. Your father's business was collapsing. Josh needed help, Megan. Stop, I said firmly, raising my hand. You don't get to list your excuses. You had a choice every single time I called. And you chose yourselves. You chose convenience. You chose comfort. You chose pride. And that choice nearly destroyed me and Lily. So don't stand here and tell me you did it for the family. The silence that followed was thick, filled with everything unspoken, everything festering between us for years. Finally, my father leaned forward, his face red with anger. You're ungrateful, he hissed. We raised you, we gave you everything, and this is how you repay us. By humiliating us. By dragging us through the mud. I looked him dead in the eyes. You raised me to believe family meant safety. But you taught me the opposite. And I'm not here to humiliate you. I'm here to tell the truth. Whether you accept it or not is up to you. But hear me now, I don't need you anymore. I have my daughter. I have my foundation. I have people who see me, who value me, who would never let me suffer alone. I am done being your scapegoat. Daniel finally spoke. His voice low, almost broken. Emily. Sorry. I should have helped. I should have stood up for you. I turned to him, my expression softening just slightly. You had a choice too, Daniel. And maybe you regret it now, but I needed you then. And you weren't there. He lowered his head, unable to meet my eyes. I stood, gathering the papers back into the folder. I didn't come here for forgiveness. I didn't come here to beg for love anymore. I came here to end this. To cut the chains. You don't own me. You don't define me. And you don't control my future. That ends tonight. My mother whispered, almost desperate. Emily, please don't do this. We're family. I paused at the door, turned back one last time, and said the words I had been carrying in my chest for months. Family is not blood. Family is love. And you stopped being my family the night you let me freeze. Then I walked out, closing the door behind me. Outside, the snow had finally begun to fall, soft and quiet, blanketing the streets in white. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the cold air, feeling it fill my lungs with something new. Not fear. Not grief. But freedom. When I returned to Lily, I lifted her into my arms, kissed her soft cheek and whispered, "It's over. We're free." The months that followed were not easy, but they were full of light. The Emma Rose Foundation flourished, reaching more women and children than I ever dreamed. Each story I heard, each mother we helped, was a reminder that my pain had a purpose, that even in my darkest hour something good was born. Sometimes late at night I would think of my family. I wondered if they ever looked back with regret, if they ever thought of Lily growing up without grandparents, aunts or uncles. But then I would remind myself, it wasn't my job to carry their guilt. It wasn't my job to fix what they had broken. My job was to live, to love, to raise my daughter in a world filled with kindness instead of cruelty, to give her the family I never had. And every time I saw her smile, every time she called me Mommy and reached for me with open arms, I knew I had chosen right. Because in the end, the story wasn't about betrayal. It wasn't about loss. It was about survival, about strength, about rewriting the meaning of family. And though the scars would never fully fade, I carried them proudly. They were proof that I had been tested, and I had endured. That I had been broken but I had risen. And that in the snowy streets of Ohio, a young mother and her baby had started again. Not as victims but as survivors, as builders of something new. That was the ending I chose. And that was enough.